Tag TV and Tag Radio. Be seen and heard by both technology users and technology producers throughout the state of Georgia and around the world. Low cost, big benefits, powerhouse online branded video and audio has arrived. Tag TV, Tag Radio, there's a lot more to know. This edition of Tech Talk is brought to you by GlobalSpeak.com, new media consultants, corporate video and audio communications, video and audio production and distribution, live and virtual event production. Tag TV and Tag Radio is a service of GlobalSpeak.com, creatively delivering powerful marketing, video, and audio solutions. The emails from the desk of the CEO. Subject line, you're invited to a forecasting meeting today at 2 p.m. That's right, you're expected to present forecasts for IT needs for the next 7 to 10 years. Holy cow! What about geopolitical or domestic economic issues or rapid technological advancements or new competition from places you've never even heard of before? Cost of money? That's if you can find it. I know. We'll go conservative. Underestimate. That's safe. Except you could lose sales. We could miss the market. We could lose customers that are no longer satisfied. Opportunity is hard to recapture with insufficient resources. Okay, forget safe. Let's go big. But what about underutilized resources or spending too early? Things happened as planned, and they do sometimes. And because you've used up capacity too early, you can't deliver. And, oh yes, there's cash, as in cash flow. And that could be a bit of a problem. Yikes. What if forecasting your IT needs wasn't dependent on the right balance between over and under, between risk and reward, the balancing act of scale and flexibility and the risk of incorrectly forecasting long-term IT needs? Greetings, everyone. It's Friday, November 2nd, 2012, and this is Tech Talk with Technology Association of Georgia President Tino Mantella. I'm your guest host, Frank Baia. Up to the Tech Talk. Can you grow your business and leave IT infrastructure to someone else? Let's get the rarely shared insights from the true seasoned Atlanta-based technology executive and, as they say, insider in IT infrastructure experience for over a decade, Chris Oberkfell, Vice President, Marketing and Sales Operations for QTS, Quality Technology Services, custom data centers, co-location, and cloud services in over 3 million square feet of data center space nationwide. Recent research reports that QTS has 40% market share in the multi-tenant data space in Atlanta. A tech talk that offers unique insights into the burgeoning data center and cloud computing space. It's all about the difficulties that CIOs can have in projecting data center needs and why. From scale and flexibility to how size matters in IT infrastructure as we Tech Talk IT forecasting, risk and reward with QTS Vice President Chris Oberkfell. Chris, welcome to Tech Talk.
Thanks, Frank. Glad to be here.
Pretty exciting times, obviously, over the last couple of years, a little more than that. Digitalization has changed everything. It seems like we used to talk about disruptive technology. I think all technology seems to be disruptive anymore, but certainly clouds and wireless communications and new applications. It's no surprise that the importance of data centers. Let's talk a little bit about the industry in general and specifically where do you see it at now and where do you see it going?
Well, I think, Frank, you pointed out a number of trends that are most definitely driving significant growth and demand for data centers and data center services. I think when you peel that onion back just a little bit and think about the applications and the content purely from a storage and delivery and compute power perspective, those things need to live in data centers. So that's driving a significant amount of the demand within both individual companies, do-it-yourself sort of hosting of their data center infrastructure, as well as service providers like QTS who seek to provide those services. I think the second piece that you mentioned that's also important is that growing presence and access technology, a piece of the pie. The more different devices that people want to use and the more important it is for the applications to be aware of those devices, where people are, when people are available, that adds to additional complexity, both in terms of how the applications are built and stored and how the content is distributed, as well as what the security protocols and such need to be to make sure that access to that data is controlled and understood and measured and delivered in ways that support ongoing application performance.
If we had to break it down, into three larger groups, I wouldn't even call them categories, but where I'm going is something like custom data centers and co-location and cloud services. Maybe there's more than that, but certainly I think those pretty well encompass a lot of what you're talking about. Tell us a little bit about each one of those aspects, and maybe which one do you think is going to represent the greater growth for data centers?
Well, I think those are three pretty distinct segments, and there are competitors that have chosen to deliver services across those. QTS has solutions across each of those three that you mentioned, and I think the key market drivers and key considerations for each of those service solutions differ by the market segments that they serve. So I think if you start, with what QTS refers to as custom data center, some folks in the industry would refer to that as wholesale or enterprise. I think there you're looking at, significant footprints to support companies who have, very material IT or technology needs, folks whose whole business runs on that platform. Some of the Web 2.0 companies, some enterprise groups that, process application support for, thousands of end users, financial services firms handling, massive numbers of transactions, those sorts of things. What those folks are looking for is really an environment that provides the security and redundancy and resiliency that they need to make sure that significant piece, that driver of their business, is protected and available for end users at all times. They're looking for that, cost-effective, highly reliable, highly redundant infrastructure to support their businesses. The trend there, it really kind of comes to, who's leading or driving with those application services. How are they integrating that into their business? Where do they need to put those so that the end users have the right sort of application environment? You look at companies like Facebook or Yahoo, who are out in the marketplace building data centers for themselves, very homogeneous kinds of infrastructure deployments where they're, wringing every last ounce of energy conservation that they can and power utilization that they can to make those footprints as cost-effective as possible. That's sort of one end of the spectrum. As you move away from that edge where it's become economically feasible or preferable to sort of build your own, are the providers of custom data centers or wholesale or enterprise space, like QTS, like some other competition that we face in that market space. And the key piece or key value proposition for them is, hey, there is less risk, there is less cost, and there is a better balance sheet P&L solution for you than building it yourself.
It's a form of collaboration as much as it's a co-location. I mean, I guess really where I'm headed is that as you're talking, I can understand just the cost of energy and the energy saving of combining all of those needs together versus building out independent. I mean, the redundancy and duplication has got to be ridiculously expensive and a challenge from an environmental standpoint.
Well, that's true to a certain extent, but it depends on the scale. And I think that when you look at those custom data center solutions, the piece that the service providers are really able to address best, in my opinion, is risk mitigation. And risk mitigation takes a couple of forms. There are, sort of design and build considerations. Hey, how do I manage the capacity? How do I, run this construction project to build my data center out correctly? Right? That's sort of the setup piece. Then there's operations. How do I operate and support this? How do I make sure I have the right level of redundancy in the infrastructure? And then finally, there's, I've invested all this money. How does that impact my P&L, right? So as a service provider delivering custom data center solutions, we can build it more reliably because we've done it more than once. We can do it quicker and with capital that's happening from the infrastructure side of the house as opposed to capital that you have to divert from your business. And 3, we know how to run and operate and maintain the equipment such that you don't introduce operational risks as well. So that's a key consideration.
Huge, no doubt about it.
What's also important when you look at multi-tenant data center solutions like QTS, and this gets to your point, we have the ability to offer better flexibility to those customers as they ramp up their infrastructure and as they try and map their investment and their spend to their needs, on an ongoing basis. I'll use an example. We had a financial services customer that, the CIO shared, he was being asked to project data center need requirements and infrastructure requirements within, 3 to 5%, 7 years out. Personally, I have no idea how the guy does that. And it goes back to.
Could you do that 7 months out?
It goes back to the trends and changes and the impact of technology that you mentioned when we started out. Right? He has no visibility into the equipment changes that will happen in a 7-year period.
Sure.
He doesn't have. Think about 7 years ago. Think about 5 years ago. Right? Did we have a really good understanding of what the impact of virtualization and cloud services and the emergence of public and private clouds? Did we know what the impact of that would be on people's businesses? Did we know that Facebook and Groupon and the App Store and the Android marketplace would take hold the way that they've taken hold? I think there were a few people that considered that, but how does that affect a financial services institution or a gaming company or anyone else in a vertical not specifically tied to that app?
And I think of big data and analytics and all of the other things that have come about that there. So many times we talk about where in the past products were created to fill a need. Now we create products that create a demand. So how would you project, as you call it, visualization, to be able to have the visibility to see ahead and to have any kind of projection like that? But one of the things that I think this kind of relates to, and you've touched upon it, but maybe go into more detail. Certainly recent news is that your data center now in Atlanta is encompassing, 1,300,000 square feet. The joking line about size mattering. Does size matter? Is that an advantage?
Well, and I think, QTS has two sites here in Atlanta, and they total, as you said, 1.3, 1.4 million feet. And I think, size matters to an extent. What we believe here at QTS is that there is a benefit to delivering data center services at a scale that allows flexibility for customers. And by providing a variety of infrastructure service options, we can service, the widest swath of customers, both in terms of, what they might call their primary need, as well as what they may define as secondary need, and provide the right infrastructure for their applications. Some applications are best suited, as we talked about, for custom data center kinds of solutions. Some are better suited for, more traditional retail co-location where, the customer still controls all that equipment and, manages that infrastructure within a secure facility. And some are ready for migration to the cloud where the customer wants to outsource not just the hosting of that application, but also the underlying equipment that it runs on and seeks the monitoring capabilities and the flexibility that kind of infrastructure solution provides.
Now, the buzz about clouds, and you talk a lot, we all talk a lot about clouds, but does the customer adoption match the media coverage?
I think that it does and it doesn't, right? And cloud is for lack of a better descriptor, still a little bit of a nebulous term. Mm-hmm. And you look at the definitions and the service offers and how people and service providers refer to cloud, and it's sort of all-encompassing. And there is another level of specifics and details that are required to really understand, how that plays, right? You look at Amazon, who gets a lot of the press for being the biggest and the leader in that public cloud space. And they've had, different issues, but they're providing a very rich and robust environment for IT and application providers to do test dev and to present applications to end users at a huge scale. And then you look at, other providers in the market and QTS, who is taking an approach that says, hey, this is how we're going to deliver this virtualization technology to the market, and this is how we're going to define our cloud services. For us, we're much more interested in how do we support production kinds of environments and take the same sort of mission-critical approach to the cloud infrastructure solutions that we try and apply to both our custom data center and co-location space. So we're looking specifically to serve those verticals and those businesses that are, migrating production applications because that's where, our security and our infrastructure and our compliance efforts and the sustainability steps that we're taking all have value and help deliver, the peace of mind and the reliability and the availability that the customers demand for those kinds of applications.
The information is crucially important. I can't imagine a business anymore, as you mentioned. I love the word about visualizing ahead of time visibility, I think was the term you used. Because I think everything that we've talked about in terms of the complexity and the rapid turnover and the change and disruption, it's just from a business management standpoint. It's just one challenge after another, and it's really to operate without the kind of information. I guess the point I'm leading to, Chris, is that unfortunately we're quickly running out of time, and I really want to invite you back because you're providing, I think, a extremely valuable education to a lot of our listeners that are weighing out the options, trying to figure out what to do next. One thing for sure I do want to touch upon, though, before we close, and you mentioned the word security. Certainly, I think data breaches and the exposure of customer information, it seems like they're in the news on a daily basis, no less weekly basis. How are your customers keeping their data safe?
Right. Well, and Frank, as a data center service provider, we don't like to talk about data breaches or outages or anything like that.
Pardon me.
I think your question's well positioned, right? That whole security and data protection facet of the business is something that is shared between service providers and customers. Right, we can do an awful lot as a service provider. We can define all the security in the facility. We can define all of the access policies and processes within the building. We can control who gets to see what, who gets access to where, and we can ensure that we have all of the necessary audit and compliance and such put together. What we then need to do is make sure that the customers are doing their part in securing their applications. We have some value-add services that help them do that, from a IDS and such, firewalls and security services that we can apply to our infrastructure solutions. But at the end of the day, this is a shared responsibility. The data center service providers take a piece of that, up from the infrastructure, but the customers still have to maintain, those best practices on the application side to make sure that the data is wholly safe. Well,
I'd rather hear something like that and know that we're working on it together than to, not to imply anybody misleading anyone, but doing hyperbole that makes me feel safer, and then I don't protect myself. So.
Yeah, no, and again, it's just like, the same sort of thing applies to businesses, at a little bit of grander scale, but that applies to anyone as an individual.
Sure.
right? If you're out walking around handing your Social Security number and your birth date and your license to everyone and anyone, you're going to have a problem. And, that's not unlike, what we have to do as data center providers. Hey, the foundation is secure, right? Your application comes on the infrastructure. You have responsibilities to make sure that you're protecting your business, and supplying access and whatnot to the end users, as appropriate.
Well, Chris, a lot of exciting things that are happening in the industry. Markets are expanding. Opportunities are changing every day, as we've talked about with technology's evolution and the dynamics that are playing out in the marketplace. Certainly, QTS is not only staying up with the competition, they're setting the standard, I think, in terms of where things are headed and how to best manage things in the future. One thing for sure, I know you guys are busy, and I just want to say thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule for joining us for a few minutes today on Tech Talk.
Thanks a bunch, Frank. I guess one thing that I will say before I let me go,
sure,
is that it's all about understanding what is the right infrastructure for the customer's applications, and defining that in a way that provides the flexibility for that business growth and the security and reliability and redundancy to make sure that those applications are available to end users, and that the IT infrastructure is the enabler of the business and not something that ends up hindering that business. And service providers like QTS, in the multi-tenant data center space, offer customers significant value against what the do-it-yourself solutions might look like.
Strongest message we could close with. Again, thank you for taking time to be with us.
Appreciate it, Frank. Look forward to talking to you again.